Hi everyone. So today I'm going to be walking you through how to structure a high-level English analysis paragraph in IB English Lang Lit. And I'm also going to walk you through an example of an analysis paragraph on Medusa by Carol Ann Duffy. This is really, really important throughout your entire IB course. It's kind of the foundation because in your paper one unseen, you're going to be analyzing an unseen text. Paper two is a literary analysis. And even for your IO, so that's your individual oral assessment, where you will be analyzing and comparing a literary text and a non literary text. So, a lot of us previously have used the PEE structure. So, for those of you who don't know, that stands for point, evidence, and explain. Now, the thing about this structure is it's a solid starting point, but on its own, it doesn't really get you into the top mark bands because it often misses the actual technique, the effect, the reader response, and a strong link back to the topic. Now, that's something that IB examiners really, really love and expect from your paragraph. So, the structure I use and what I'll show you today is kind of an elevated version of that. So, the structure I use is this one, and I use it in all my pieces of writing, and it basically breaks down the PEE structure into smaller steps that are more easy to follow. So let me quickly explain what each of these entails, and then we can take a look at what it's like in action, so in an actual grade 7 paragraph. So the first thing we start off, very much like your PE structure, is your point. So it's a topic sentence, and it basically answers the question that's being asked. So if somebody asks, how is Medusa presented in Duffy's poem, you want to say, Medusa is presented as an emotionally disturbed character. So that's your topic sentence. It has to be really, really clear, and it has to be concise. The last thing you want is a really, really long topic sentence that's like, Medusa is presented as emotionally fragmented, where she does this, and this is undermined by her. You're really not going to find a lot of time to cover all of that, so I say stick with one main idea. Now, the next thing you need is evidence. I usually recommend sticking with a short, well chosen quote, and it's really, really got to link back to your topic sentence. So, this is kind of the most important thing you're doing. So, you're picking a piece of evidence that really backs up your point. The next thing we're going to do is explain. So, we're going to explain the quote that you've chosen. So, you're actually talking about what is the quote saying. So, in your own words, you're going to express like this quote is trying to say this and that. So, you're basically saying the quote in your own words. You're not heading into a deeper level of analysis as such. This is still very, very surface level. Now, the next thing we move on to is a technique. So your technique can be as basic as I said, an adjective, or as fancy as a metaphor. So you're going to pick out a certain technique, so adjectives, metaphors, etc. So this technique is really, really, really important. And basically what it does is it shows the examiner that not only do you know what your quote means, you know the part of your quote that has the biggest impact on the reader. So then you're going to explain, and you're going to talk about the effect of the technique. So this is where your deeper level of analysis comes in, and it's not included in the PEE structure. So you're talking about deeper meanings, and you're talking about meanings, and you're talking about connotations. All right. So your next thing is your reader response. So that's kind of like, how might a reader feel, emotions, and how might they react. So this, you won't see this in every single analysis paragraph, but it's always really nice to have, just as an added point. And your last point is the most important. So this is your link back to your thesis, so back to the main question. And it's a final sentence, and it ties back to your main idea. So basically, let me grab another color. So these two are kind of linked in a way. Now, let's take a look at this structure in action. We're gonna identify this particular structure, and we are going to, I took this with me. So basically, we're going to identify this structure in an analysis paragraph that we've written about Medusa. So if you haven't read this particular poem yet, feel free to pause the video and just give it a read so that you know what I'm talking about here. But for those of you who have already read it, we're just going to skip straight onto the paragraph, and we're going to identify where the author has used each of these points. So the first thing is a clear point. It has to have a topic sentence, and it's clear and concise, and it comes at the very beginning of your paragraph. Well, great, we can see that right here where it says, in Medusa, Duffy exaggerates the obsessive nature of Medusa's love. The next thing we need is a very solid piece of evidence. So a well-chosen quote. Now we can see in the poem there are many, many quotations that show this particular obsessive nature of Medusa's love, but the one that the author here has chosen is, be terrified, it's you I love, perfect man, Greek god, my own. So that's our piece of evidence there. Then the author has gone on to explain and kind of in their own words say what the author is trying to portray. So it says, these lines depict Medusa's obsession with attaining perfection in her love life, leading to her idolizing her partner to such an extent that she neglects her own value as an individual. Now, one really important thing to mention here is they have kind of linked back to the point already, which already puts you in that top mark band because the examiner can see that you're very, very focused on the piece of evidence you've chosen, and the piece of evidence that you've chosen links very clearly to your point. But they haven't just rephrased their point, they've gone on to say that it has led to her idolizing her partner to such an extent that she neglects her own value as an individual. So you're kind of adding in a little bit extra beyond that point. Okay, so the next thing we're looking for is technique. So that's your adjectives, your metaphors, and all of that. Now, here we can see that we have the repetition of personal pronouns, I and my, and the hyperbole of calling her partner a Greek god. Now, there's something very interesting about the way that the author has done this, and basically what they've done is they've given their point, they've taken their evidence, and because their piece of evidence is slightly longer, they've broken it down into two techniques and two explanations of each technique. Now that is something you can adopt in your own writing, especially when you're doing like a huge paragraph and you maybe want 2 or 3 quotations. So where you can just do your point, repeat this middle bit here, and then have a link at the end. So that would also be a way that you could approach this, but for this purpose, we're gonna discuss how they've used the structure. So then after giving a technique, you need to explain it again. So the effect of the technique. So here the author has said, the repetition of the personal pronouns I and my exaggerates the possessive nature of her emotions and her desperation to cling to her relationship in order to validate herself. So that's your explanation of the technique. It takes your little point and puts it on a deeper level. So it really shows how the technique that you've picked out adds to your point. And we also see this where it says, the hyperbole of her calling a Greek god not only links to the mythological theme of the poem, but illustrates her putting her love on a pedestal and regarding him as having a higher importance than her. which takes away from her strength in standing alone. Fab. So we've got our little explanations and techniques highlighted, and now we can move on to a reader's response. So our reader's response is seen, in fact, in the very next line, where she says, the obsessive tone might leave the reader feeling unsettled as Duffy reimagines a powerful mythological figure crumbling under the weight of her own desire. So, not only have we said how the reader would respond, we've explained why the reader would respond in that particular way. And the very last thing they do to wrap up their paragraph is they link to the thesis or point. So it says Duffy ultimately critiques the way romantic idealization can become toxic, especially when it overrides personal strength and identity. So not only have they linked back to this topic sentence, they have also added in that this happens when it overrides personal strength and identity. So that's how you turn one quote into a rich, developed analysis using this structure. It keeps you focused, shows your understanding of the technique and effect, and makes sure that you're always, always, always linking back to the bigger idea. That's it from me for today. Try the structure in your next practice paragraph, and if you want more examples or breakdowns, stay tuned because there are loads more coming soon. Thank you.